It's become my life work as well, in a way that wasn't preordained by any means. On the heels of 9/11, I had the good fortune of getting to work with David Gergen for a few years, the presidential advisor and now commentator, basically getting to sit back and think through the big public policy challenges facing our nation at the time and the world in general, getting to write about it, study, think, talk to experts in the field, and so forth. And after a few years of that, I went on to Harvard Business School thinking I really want to do something about these challenges, create organizations, entities to solve these problems and actually bring value to people. And as is so often the case, our lives are not by any means linear. And while at the business school, I had the great fortune of taking Professor Clay Christensen's class, the father of disruptive innovation theory, and it totally transformed the way I saw the world. It allowed me to see why so many transformations that were happening around us had occurred, why they had formerly seemed so mysterious, and they didn't seem so counterintuitive anymore. And taking these theories, Professor Christensen and I collaborated on a book called Disrupting Class, where we had the opportunity to think through how do we apply these such that we could actually change the education system. And out of that, I created this organization with him and another colleague called Innosight Institute, a nonprofit think tank dedicated to applying the theories of disruptive innovation to solve problems in the social sector. And so, much by accident, I was back into public policy. But now with tools at the disposal to help explain and create meaningful change with the entrepreneurs here today and others to actually move forward into the student-centric system. And I want to talk today about one of these major challenges facing us as a nation right now from a public policy perspective, which is that we're at this really strange time in our country's history, where we have record high unemployment in a generation, millions of people looking for work, and yet at the very same time, we have lots of employers who say they have over 3 million job openings, and yet they can't find qualified people to fill these openings. Just think about that for a second. Millions of people looking for jobs, and millions of jobs with employers that say they can't find people to fill them. It's a really strange paradox right now in our country's history. And in the past, what we would do when we had this talent mismatch is turn to our traditional institutions of higher education to help solve these problems. But just as we would like to do that right now, our traditional institutions of higher education are literally going through a crisis of their own. For many of them, their business models are fundamentally collapsing. At a time when we need them to be expanding access and doing a better job of preparing students for this world, they're actually limiting access, or in some cases even rolling it back. And in the absence of huge infusions of cash, they tell us, they can't solve this problem. And so what I wanted to do is just first start off and talk about, through our theories, why we see this business model fundamentally breaking right now, and then go into something that we think can actually really solve this problem, and along the way have some huge benefits for learning and improving this situation, not just for the country, but for those individuals as well, which really should be the ultimate point of this as we create a student-centric system. Now, stepping outside of higher education for a moment, we basically see that there's 3 generic types of business models in the world. And I apologize for a little bit of jargon, but the first one is what we call a solution shop. This is basically where you bring unstructured problems to experts who solve these problems with their vast amounts of intuition. McKinsey is a classic example of it, but if you went back before the Industrial Revolution, what you'd see is that actually solution shops dominated our economy. You used to have craftspeople that you'd bring these problems to that would create pots for you. They'd create barrels, horseshoes, your shoes. These were all done by craftspeople in solution shops. The second type of model is what we call a value-adding process business. Forget about the name. But basically what happens is we take inputs, we add value to them through a consistent process, and we ship them out as outputs. Jiffy Lube is a classic case of this, but we see it all the time, and it actually was the thing. This force was what drove the Industrial Revolution through factory models, with the power looms that powered the factories in Lowell, Massachusetts, and dotted the landscape in manufacturing and so forth. The third type of business model is what we call a facilitated network business. This is basically where people come to a network and exchange things. You put things in the case of telecom, you put information in, other people are taking it out. Facebook is a classic example of a facilitated network business, and really what's interesting is a lot of the economic growth in this country right now is being driven by these network businesses. And what's